Today on the Daily Scoop podcast from the Scoop News Group, the White House sets a $75.7 billion top-line IT budget for fiscal 2027. And the General Services Administration sticks with the plan to use agencies' leftover money to fund the TMF in 2027. It's Tuesday, April 7th, 2026. Welcome to the Daily Scoop podcast, where you'll hear the latest news and trends facing government leaders. I'm the host of the Daily Scoop podcast, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for joining me. And now let's dive into the day's top headlines. After slashing IT spending across civilian federal agencies last year, the White House's fiscal 2027 budget calls for a return to pre-Trump levels and then some. Though the proposal from President Donald Trump is just a starting point for haggling in Congress over what will ultimately be spent, a summary document released Friday projects $75.7 billion in federal civilian IT spending, up from $67.9 billion in fiscal 2026 and $75.1 billion in fiscal 2025. That number, however, doesn't include the Department of Defense's IT budget request, which in fiscal 2026 was a whopping $66.1 billion on its own. Despite the upward trend for overall spending on tech, OMB's budget request calls for a small decrease in funding for cybersecurity across all civilian agencies, falling from about $12.5 billion this year to $12.2 billion in 2027. This trend tracks with the Trump administration's decision to cut the cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency's budget by $707 million in 2027. The largest IT investments are slated for the Department of Veterans Affairs, $12.2 billion, the Department of Homeland Security, $11.7 billion, and the Department of Health and Human Services, $9.5 billion. Getting more granular with the IT budgets, the VA is the beneficiary of an additional funding infusion for its electronic health record modernization to the tune of $4.2 billion, an increase of $800 million year over year. The much-beleaguered EHRM initiative received a big boost in Trump's fiscal 2026 budget request as well, and the summary document takes a shot at the stalled effort under the Biden administration. DHS's Tech Shop is also a major winner in the new budget proposal, including the procurement of advanced border security technology as part of a $190 billion investment for the agency through the so-called Working Families Tax Cut, $136 million to Customs and Border Protection for its automated commercial environment technology, plus $322 million for counter-drug tech and operations, and $1.2 billion for protective technology and enhanced protective operations at the U.S. Secret Service. Now, moving on to other news, the General Services Administration is lobbying once again to rely on the transfer of unobligated appropriations from other agencies to support projects under the Technology Modernization Fund. The Trump administration included a provision in its fiscal 2027 budget justification for GSA to collect up to $100 million in funding that would otherwise be unavailable for obligation from other agencies and bring that funding into the TMF. The proposed funding mechanism comes after GSA included similar but broader language in its fiscal 2026 justification, calling for both currently available funding and unobligated balances of expired discretionary funds from other agencies to be transferred into the TMF. Ultimately, the appropriations laws passed by Congress for 2026 included a pair of statutes that allowed for those transfers to happen with limits, though it's unclear how or if GSA has used the authority yet. It also gave the TMF a $5 million plus-up and extended the fund's authorization through the end of fiscal 2026. In its 2027 justification, GSA cited those statutes as the foundation on which it modeled its proposed provision. However, the latest iteration narrows the authority to allow for transferring only funds that are otherwise no longer available to agencies for obligation and no longer includes language for currently available funding. GSA goes on to say in its latest justification, quote, "This provision is essential to providing the TMF with necessary funds to help the federal government address critical technology challenges by modernizing high-priority systems, improving AI adoption, and supporting cross-government collaboration and scalable services." The White House has faced perennial challenges in soliciting new TMF funds through appropriations. This provision, along with more stringent repayment requirements, gives the TMF a path forward if Congress continues to hold back support for the fund. And appropriations or not, GSA said it's committed to long-term financial sustainability while meeting the growing demand from agencies tackling critical technology infrastructure investments. This all, of course, hinges on the TMF being authorized for 2027, another battle the administration and congressional supporters on the Hill will have to fight and win before the fund's current authorization expires September 30th. GSA said that it and OMB are actively working with Congress to reauthorize the TMF beyond September 30th of this year so that it can continue its critical work of driving digital transformation and IT modernization across the federal government. For more news at the intersection of the federal government and technology, make sure to visit fedscoop.com. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Daily Scoop podcast, available on all podcast platforms. If you've already rated the podcast on your platform of choice, thanks so much. High ratings and good reviews of the show help more people to find it. The Daily Scoop podcast is a production of the Scoop News Group in Washington, D.C. Adam Butler and Carlin Fisher help put the show together, and the entire Scoop News Group team contributes. We'll be back tomorrow with more top headlines. Until then, I'm your host, as always, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for listening.